I used to think that taking the night shift at a CVS pharmacy would be the safest way to buy myself some time. 6 years of pharmacy school had scraped me raw, leaving me with a fancy piece of paper, a pile of student loans I'd never dare tally up in daylight, and no idea how to exist beyond the glow of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic wipes. So when my local CVS posted an opening for a night pharmacist, I didn't hesitate. The same store where my mom used to drag me every Sunday morning for discount vitamins, cough syrup, and whatever was on sale in the seasonal aisle, it felt almost comforting. Familiar enough to pretend I hadn't failed at adulthood just yet. I could pad my resume, keep the debt collectors quiet, and avoid the sun that reminded me how much I hadn't figured out. I didn't even think to wonder why they needed a pharmacist overnight. I was just grateful. My savings account had been on life support for months, and every time I opened my banking app, it felt like peeking into a coffin I wasn't ready to climb into yet. My first night on the job was quiet in a way that felt more like being held underwater than being alone. The parking lot was empty when I pulled in, the neon sign buzzing like a trapped bug overhead. Inside, the automatic doors parted with a sigh that almost sounded disappointed to see me. Miss Agnes was waiting behind the counter. If you'd told me she was the store manager for the past 50 years, I'd have believed you. She looked like every substitute grandmother I'd ever wished for. Tiny and stooped, a pink cardigan fastened with pearl buttons, lavender perfume that hit me like a memory I couldn't place. Her voice was soft and warm, like tea left out just long enough to cool. But the way she kept her eyes just past mine made my neck itch. She walked me through the aisles, pointing out the cold drinks that never sold, the end caps cluttered with dusty greeting cards, the break room with its stale coffee smell, and tiny window that faced a brick wall. The back office was a closet, pretending to be an office. A single desk, an ancient computer that wheezed like it was allergic to Windows updates, and a flickering set of security screens that showed too much nothing. Miss Agnes kept her hands busy as she spoke, tapping the register, rearranging pill bottles until their labels faced exactly forward, tracing the edges of the shelves like she was drawing invisible lines to keep the store's secrets in place. When the tour ended, she paused by the counter, her fingers drumming out some rhythm I couldn't catch. Then she pulled a small red envelope from her cardigan pocket. It looked oddly formal for a pharmacy. Crisp paper, CVS logo pressed into it in faded silver that flaked off when I brushed it with my thumb. "Read this before midnight, dear," she said. Her eyes drifted over my shoulder like she was watching someone else stand behind me. "Do exactly as it says, and don't try to be brave." Before I could ask her what that meant, why would I need to be brave in a CVS? She reached out and squeezed my arm. For a woman who barely reached my shoulder, her grip was sharp enough that I felt the ridges of her rings dig into my skin. She held on just long enough to make my pulse stumble, then she let go, turned on her sensible shoes, and vanished out the sliding doors without so much as a backward glance. I stood behind the counter, staring at the envelope like it might hiss if I opened it wrong. The store hummed around me, the freezers buzzing, the lights overhead ticking when they flickered. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt truly alone in a place so bright. When I tore open the flap, the paper inside smelled faintly of old cardboard and something sweeter I couldn't name. It was yellowed at the edges, the ink thin but so precise I could almost see the pen that made it. 7 customers, 7 rules. The rules didn't make sense yet, but the way my skin still prickled where Miss Agnes had grabbed me made me decide not to be curious. Not tonight. Not yet. I folded the paper back up, slipped it into my pocket, and told myself I'd just keep my head down, count pills, and mind the register like I was still in school. I'd follow the rules, I'd keep the lights on, and maybe, just maybe, I'd get through the night shift at CVS in one piece. The second night came too quickly. I'd tried to sleep after that first shift, but my brain wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Miss Agnes's rings pressed against my arm, felt the scratch of that paper in my pocket. By the time my alarm went off, I'd convinced myself I'd dreamed it up, that the rules were some weird initiation prank. But when I clocked in, the envelope was still there, tucked between my license and the spare hair tie I kept in my coat pocket. I unfolded it on the counter under the buzzing light. Rule 1 was right at the top. Mr. Greycoat. When Mr. Greycoat comes in, don't greet him. Don't meet his eyes, let him pick up the cough syrup and pay with exact change. Never touch his hand. Ignore his voice. It sounded harmless enough, stupid even. I'd spent 6 years memorizing drug interactions and Latin roots. This felt like something out of a campfire story told by kids who wanted to scare themselves before bed. But I didn't throw it away. I smoothed it flat on the counter beside the register, just to remind myself. The night dragged. Midnight bled into 1, then 2. I counted pills I didn't need to count, rearranged the cold medicine display twice just to stay awake. Every time the automatic doors sighed open, it was just a drunk college kid or a bleary-eyed dad buying diapers. Nothing strange, nothing out of place. Around 2:45, I heard it. Or maybe I didn't hear it at all. The door didn't chime. 1 second, the aisle was empty. The next, he was there. Mr. Greycoat. I knew it was him the second I saw that coat. Too long, too heavy, the kind of thing you'd wear in February, not in spring when the parking lot was damp with pollen and leftover warmth from the day. He moved like his bones didn't line up right, his shoulders twitching under the heavy wool. He drifted down the cold medicine aisle, his head tilting side to side like he was listening for something that hid behind the shelves. I dropped my gaze to the register screen. My pulse thudded in my throat, loud enough that I thought he might hear it. I tried to steady my breathing, kept my hands pressed flat against the counter so they wouldn't shake. He shuffled closer. I saw his reflection in the lottery ticket display. Just the edge of his coat and something pale where his collar should have been. He placed a bottle of cough syrup on the counter. His hand brushed the scanner. His skin looked wrong, gray and dry like old newsprint left out in the rain. I could feel him looking at me, though I didn't dare lift my head. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his mouth move. His voice was soft, too soft, but it oozed into my ears like oil slipping under a door I hadn't locked. "You look so much like her," he said. The words were too clear, dripping into my brain, cold and sticky. My fingers twitched toward the bag, wanting to ask who, wanting to look up to see if his eyes matched the voice. Rule 1 burned behind my eyes like a warning flare. I swallowed my question, rang him up with stiff hands, pushed the bag across the counter without saying a word. His dry fingers didn't touch the change. He took the bag, coat dragging along the scuffed tile as he turned away. I risked a glance, just a sliver, but he was already gone. The automatic doors hadn't moved, no chime, no hiss of air. He was just gone. I stood there long after the bottle of hand sanitizer opened beside me, rubbing it into my palms like I could scrub away the chill his voice left behind. Somewhere deep in the store, a shelf creaked. The lights flickered, then steadied. I told myself I'd followed the rule exactly. I hadn't looked him in the eye, I hadn't answered him. I'd done it right. I closed the envelope, folded it so tight it almost tore. I slid it into my pocket like it might keep the cold out, like it might keep Mr. Greycoat from coming back. But the store felt different now. The aisles too long, the corners too dark. And I knew that rule or no rule, I'd see him again. Some things don't need the door to come back in. By the end of my 3rd week, the pharmacy had started to feel like an aquarium I couldn't swim out of. The bright aisles, the low hum of the refrigerators, the sticky spot behind the register where the mop never really worked, all of it felt too normal on the surface. But every corner held a shadow that felt like it was waiting for me to slip. I read the red envelope every night now. I kept it folded in my pocket until the paper went soft at the edges. Sometimes I'd pull it out just to make sure the rules hadn't changed while I wasn't looking. I think part of me hoped they'd vanish, that I'd unfold the paper and see nothing but blank yellow creases. But the rules stayed the same. The names stayed the same. Rule 2, the twins in yellow. If they come, do not separate them. Give them what they ask for. If they split, lock yourself in the office until dawn. I told myself it was nonsense, that maybe Miss Agnes had slipped something extra in my training papers, some bizarre old store policy nobody bothered to update. But every time I saw a smudge of gray on the glass doors or a flicker in the shampoo aisle, I remembered Mr. Greycoat. The way the door never opened for him. The way he'd spoken to me like he already knew me. So I read Rule 2, again and again, until I could see it even when my eyes were shut. It was a Tuesday when they came. Around 1:30 in the morning, the hour when the air in the store feels like stale hospital sheets, and the parking lot might as well be another planet. I was restocking the gum display when I heard the soft tap of shoes near the entrance. The door slid open slow, the chime almost too faint to catch. I stood up so fast my knees popped. 2 little girls stood just past the doormat. Tiny raincoats, the brightest yellow I'd ever seen under those sickly lights. The hoods were pulled low, but I could see pale cheeks and big eyes peeking out from the shadows. It hadn't rained in days. The weather was bone dry. The parking lot cracked from heat that stuck around too late into spring. But the tiles under their feet shone with tiny puddles that spread like spilled paint. They held hands so tight their knuckles looked bleached. When they moved together, like their elbows and shoulders were stitched by invisible thread. No sound except the squeak of wet rubber boots. They came straight to me, stopped just shy of the register, lifted their heads at the same time, and spoke in a voice that felt too soft to be real. "Candy, please." 2 words, 1 mouth. It rattled in my teeth, left a taste like sugar gone stale. I didn't ask what kind. I didn't ask anything. I grabbed chocolate bars, gummy worms, sour strips, anything I could reach without leaving the counter. They watched, heads tilting in perfect unison, hands never slipping apart. When my basket overflowed, I placed the candy in front of them. They unzipped tiny backpacks shaped like cartoon rabbits, ears flopping over the counter's edge. Piece by piece, they packed the sweets away, neat, polite, no sound but the rustle of plastic wrappers. Then it happened, a faint giggle. It slipped out from aisle 6, soft, high, echoing in a way that made my spine bend cold. I looked up, counting. 1 girl still in front of me, 1 gone. I felt my throat lock. The candy basket slipped from my hand, hit the tile with a clatter that sounded too loud in the empty store. Rule 2, do not separate them. Too late. 1 gone, 1 standing too still, her wet boots dripping on my shoes. Before my brain could catch up, my feet moved. I stumbled backward, nearly tripped over the scanner cord. I bolted for the back office, my keys already trembling in my pocket. I slammed the flimsy door shut behind me, turned the lock so fast it jammed. The tiny security screens flickered in the corner, static chewing the corners of every aisle. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for anything. Footsteps, voices, that soft giggle that had hooked into my molars. It came and went. Little taps of rubber boots, candy wrappers rustling, torn open and dropped somewhere I couldn't see. A soft hum that sounded like a nursery rhyme I hadn't heard since I was small enough to be carried through these aisles myself. I didn't sit down. I just watched the screens and waited for the dawn to peel the darkness off the parking lot. When I finally cracked the office door open, the store looked like it had never been touched. No puddles, no footprints. The only proof they'd been here was the candy shelf. Empty, gaps where chocolate should have been. And the freezer door ajar, a single shredded wrapper tucked inside like someone tried to hide it from the daylight. I found footprints later. Tiny, wet ovals pressed into the bathroom ceiling tiles like someone had walked upside down, just to remind me the rules didn't care about gravity. Or me. I didn't tell Miss Agnes. When I came in the next night, she was gone. Just the note in the drawer, reminding me I was still the night pharmacist. And the envelope in my pocket. Soft and worn, rules waiting for the next one to break me open. 2 months in, the nights blended together like someone had spilled ink over my calendar. My days didn't feel real anymore. I'd wake up with the taste of stale coffee on my tongue, check my phone to see the sun blazing outside my blackout curtains, and wonder if it was worth trying to sleep again at all. The store felt different now. The corners darker than they should be. The hum of the freezers too loud in my ears. I'd stopped pretending I could explain away the things I'd seen. The red envelope stayed folded in my pocket, so long the ink smudged at the corners. Every time I unfolded it, the rules reminded me that I wasn't imagining it. I was surviving it. Barely. I kept reading Rule 3 like maybe the words would rearrange into something normal. Rule 3, Mrs. Ellis. If Mrs. Ellis comes, hand her the sealed bag from the bottom drawer. Do not look inside. Do not speak. It sounded so simple, a sealed bag, a quiet customer. No questions. Just do it and move on. That's what I told myself as I sipped stale break room coffee at 2 a.m., staring at the security screens that flickered with static whenever I blinked too long. She arrived without warning. No chime, no rush of air. One moment the store was empty, the next she was standing at the end of the first aisle. I didn't have to wonder if it was her. Nobody else looked like that. Ellis wore a green shawl, so frayed it looked like it might drip off her shoulders. Her hunched back made her head bob forward with each tiny step. She smelled like flowers left too long in a dirty vase, sweet but rotten around the edges. Damp linen clung to her like she'd come in from a thunderstorm, only she could see. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her eyes, black and sunken, locked on me while her fingers tapped the counter. One nail at a time, a rhythm too slow and deliberate. Each tap sent a pinch of nausea twisting in my stomach. I remembered the drawer immediately. I ducked down so fast I smacked my elbow on the register. My fingers scrabbled through loose pens, old receipts, stale breath mints. Then I found it. A white paper bag, sealed with tape so yellowed it looked like old bones. I could feel the weight inside, soft but shifting like it didn't want to stay still. I knew the rule. I should have just handed it over. Should have let her take it and vanish into the night like Mr. Greycoat and the twins. But my fingers twitched at the tape. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the smell, a sour, wet stink that made me want to know what could rot inside sealed paper. Just a peek. I told myself it'd be harmless. Just a glance to prove there was nothing worse inside than stale pills or moldy gauze. The tape gave way with a quiet snap. The bag gaped open under the harsh register light. Inside were teeth. Not single teeth like a child might tuck under a pillow, but whole rows of them, gums still attached, roots dark and slick. They twitched when the stale air touched them, a wet shudder that made my vision swim. A hiss pulled my eyes up. Mrs. Ellis's lips peeled back, or what was left of them. Her mouth was a mess of black gaps and raw gums, empty spaces where teeth should have been. I realized then, I'd peeked at something that wasn't mine to see. She snatched the bag from the counter so fast my hand burned where her nails scraped my skin. She turned without a word, shuffled toward the door, her shawl dragging on the tile like something leaking out behind her. I stood frozen behind the counter, my heartbeat so loud it drowned out the hum of the lights. The door didn't open. She slipped through the glass like a ghost that never learned to knock. That should have been it. But rules don't like being bent, and curiosity comes at a cost. By the time I clocked out the next morning, my gums felt tender. By the time I brushed my teeth that afternoon, I was spitting pink foam into the bathroom sink. 2 days later, my dentist leaned back in his chair with a look he tried too hard to hide. "Looks like you've been grinding them in your sleep," he said. "Your gums are shredded. Did you injure yourself somehow?" I didn't tell him about the bag or the rows of teeth that moved. I didn't tell him about Mrs. Ellis's black gaps where her smile used to be. I just nodded while he poked around my mouth like he might find the answer under my tongue. When I left, my jaw ached with every step back to my car. I pressed my tongue against my teeth just to feel they were still there. That night, when I clocked in again, the envelope waited in my pocket, a soft reminder that I was 3 rules down, and my body was keeping score whether I liked it or not. By my 9th week on the overnight shift, I stopped pretending my body could bounce back. The scratches on my scalp never really healed after the nights I spent clawing at my sheets. My gums bled if I so much as bit into toast. I kept the store-brand mouthwash in my purse now, a small bottle I swished every time I felt the copper taste pooling under my tongue. Most nights, the only thing that kept me standing was the hum of the refrigerators and the thought that maybe the rules would run out before I did. I'd already broken one, bent another, and still came back every night, badge clipped to my cardigan like it made me real. I read Rule 4 again and again, whispering it under my breath while I counted boxes of cold medicine I didn't even need to stock. Rule 4. If the crying man enters, lead him to the supply room. Let him stand alone. Never listen to his words. I told myself I wouldn't slip this time. No curiosity, no half measures. I'd do what the paper said, lock the door, and wait until the lights turned pink at dawn. It was just after 3 a.m. when I heard him. Not the doors opening, not the squeak of sneakers on cheap tile. just the sound of someone coming apart from the inside out. He was crying before I ever saw him. Ragged sobs that bounced off the shampoo bottles and bounced right back into my chest. The kind of sound that makes your throat tighten, even when you know better. When he turned the corner by the painkillers, I felt my knees bend a little. He wore a suit that clung to him like wet tissue. His shoes left a trail of damp footprints that shimmered under the flickering aisle light. And where his eyes should have been, just dark hollows leaking something that was too thick to be tears. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, shoulders hitching with every broken sob. His tie floated around his collar like it had been soaked too long in something heavy. I forced myself to breathe. I stepped around the counter and walked to him, careful not to slip on the wet tiles. When I got close enough, he flinched, like a branch in the wind. But he didn't pull away when I reached for his hand. It felt wrong the second my fingers touched his. Cold, but not the kind of cold that comes from bad weather. A deep, soaked-through chill that made my bones buzz. I led him down the narrow hallway past the break room. The supply room door creaked when I pushed it open. The stale scent of mop water and old cardboard hit me like a wall. He stepped inside without a sound. His crying didn't stop, but it changed. Softer, like he was saving something for later. I turned to leave, repeating the rule in my head like a prayer I'd forgotten the words to. That's when I heard it. My name. Not the way strangers say it off a name tag. Not even the way my professors barked it across lecture halls. But soft, warm, the way my mother used to say it when I was 6 and burning with fever, half delirious on the couch while she pressed a cold cloth to my forehead. I stopped. The air behind me felt heavier, like the store was pushing its shelves closer together. He whispered again. My mother's voice, thick with static. He said my name like he wanted me to come home, like he knew exactly how I needed to hear it. I turned, just for a second. I shouldn't have, but I did. His face opened, not like a mouth, but like wet paper tearing in the rain. The crying poured out from somewhere deep inside, too loud for a throat that thin. My mother's voice bubbled up through the mess, calling me home, promising me sleep, promising me warmth if I just listened a little longer. I stumbled back, slammed the supply room door so hard the hinges rattled. My pulse knocked against my teeth as I locked it, backing away until my spine hit the break room fridge. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember the rest of that shift. All I know is I woke up in my own bed after sunset, hair plastered to my scalp, fingertips raw like I'd scraped them against the walls in my sleep. When I dragged myself to the bathroom mirror, I found scratches in my hairline, thin, red lines like something had combed through my scalp while I dreamed. Clumps of hair curled around the sink drain, damp like they'd been soaking in that stale mop bucket all night. I didn't call in sick. I didn't tell Miss Agnes, if she was even still checking in on me at all. I just rinsed my mouth with cheap antiseptic, clipped my badge back on, and read Rule 5 with shaking hands. Because the store didn't care that I was cracking open from the inside out. The store only cared that I showed up. By the time my 3rd month crept up, I'd stopped trying to fool myself that this was just a job. My hair was thin where the scratches never healed. My gums ached every time I spoke too loud. I'd wrapped myself so tightly in routine that I barely noticed the real world drifting away. All I cared about was the list in my pocket, and whether I'd follow it right this time. Rule 5 was simple. It should have been the easiest one yet. No trick, no voice, no temptation. Just a door to unlock. Rule 5, if you see him crawling, do not touch him. Open the door to the pharmacy counter and let him in. So I waited. Every night I replayed the weeping man's voice, the wet scratch of my name from behind the supply room door. I told myself I wouldn't break this rule. Not this time. The shift started normal, if any of my nights were normal anymore. The aisles hummed with old pop songs piped through the speakers. The freezers buzzed like they were whispering about me behind my back. I counted and recounted pill bottles, my fingers cold even under the harsh fluorescent lights. It was nearly 4 a.m. when I saw him. I was hunched behind the counter, scrolling mindlessly through old text messages I didn't have the courage to answer, when the overhead mirror caught something pale moving across the linoleum. I looked up too fast, nearly knocking the scanner to the floor. There he was, A man in a thin hospital gown dragging himself inch by inch down aisle 4. His knees were raw, leaving dark smears that glistened under the sickly lights. He didn't look at me, didn't cry out. He just crawled, elbows hitching like broken hinges. My first instinct was to help him up, to rush over and ask if he needed a doctor, but the rule snapped me out of it before my foot hit the tile. Do not touch him. Open the door to the pharmacy counter and let him in. I fumbled for my keys, fingers numb. The crawl marks glistened closer, a wet trail that smelled faintly like rust and something deeper, old bandages left too long on skin that couldn't heal. When he reached the counter, he didn't lift his head. He paused, trembling. I unlocked the door with shaking hands. The latch stuck once, then gave way with a soft click that sounded too loud in the hush of the store. He dragged himself through without a glance at me, hospital bracelet dangling from his wrist like a tag nobody ever removed. His bare feet slipped behind the shelves where we kept the expired painkillers, the cough syrup nobody ever bought, the samples that never got picked up. I didn't follow. I didn't peek through the shelves. I stood there, hand still on the door, telling myself I'd done it right. I hadn't touched him. I hadn't spoken. I'd obeyed. The rest of the night passed like a fever dream. The wet trail dried to nothing before my shift ended. By the time the sun cracked over the parking lot, the only sign he'd been there was a faint line of bloody fingerprints smeared along the lower shelves. Tiny dots on pill bottles I'd have to count again and again. I wiped them with the cheap disinfectant wipes we kept under the counter. The spots faded, but my hands smelled like old blood for the rest of my shift. When the morning pharmacist came in, a bright-eyed temp with fresh scrubs and no clue, I didn't say a word. I just clocked out, the red envelope pressed flat against my chest through my coat pocket. I told myself I was still in control. If I just followed the next rule, maybe the store would let me keep what was left of my hair, my gums, the parts of myself that hadn't yet turned into inventory. But when I closed my eyes in my stale apartment, I saw him again. The crawling patient dragging himself behind the counter, disappearing into the shelves that never really stayed empty for long. By now, the nights felt less like work and more like a test I kept failing. Every time I thought I'd done everything right, the store found another seam to pull at. The rules kept me upright, but the mirror told a different story. The shadows under my eyes too deep to cover with makeup, the thin spots in my hair showing patches of skin that never stopped itching. I read Rule 6 every hour that shift. Rule 6. If the baby appears, do not touch it. Ring up the formula and diapers. Wait 9 minutes. Do not listen if it cries. The words blurred when I blinked too long at them. A baby. In this place. Somehow that felt worse than anything else. Worse than Mr. Greycoat, worse than the twins, worse than the weeping man calling me by my mother's voice. It was past 2 in the morning when I left the counter to wash my hands in the back. The soap in the break room always smelled like watered-down bleach, but I scrubbed my palms raw anyway, hoping it would chase off the cold that had crept up my arm since the crawling patient dragged himself through the door. When I came back to the front, I stopped so fast I nearly slipped on the tile. There it was, a carrier, right on the counter where I scanned barcodes and rang up gum for half-asleep college kids. The blanket draped over it was covered in tiny cartoon stethoscopes, little hearts beating beside them like the cloth itself might breathe if I stared too long. The baby didn't make a sound. Its tiny hands were tucked tight under the blanket, mouth open in a soft pink O that looked too still. I could almost believe it wasn't alive, just a doll someone left as a cruel joke. I swallowed down the instinct to peek under the blanket, to reach in and check for warmth, for breath. Instead, I did what the rule said. I reached for the shelf behind the counter where the formula was stocked, the same dusty cans that never seemed to expire, and the diapers stacked next to the clearance vitamins. I rang them up slowly, each beep of the scanner too loud in the hush that settled around the pharmacy aisles. I set the items next to the carrier, careful not to brush the blanket. The baby didn't move. Its tiny chest stayed flat under the cartoon stethoscopes. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 9 minutes. That's all I had to survive. 9 minutes. The first 5 crawled by. My heartbeat filled the space where the store's soft pop music used to play. I watched the security screens flicker static in the corners. No footprints, no shadows, just the baby, silent. At 7 minutes, it shifted under the blanket. A soft, dry rustle. Its tiny fist emerged, then settled back down. I felt my throat tighten. At 8 minutes, a whimper. The sound was so faint, I almost thought I imagined it, just a sigh from an air vent, a trick of tired ears. But then the whimper grew, bubbling up like air through dirty water. At 9, it opened its eyes. I didn't see pupils, just milky white orbs, too big for its soft face. Its mouth didn't move like any baby's I'd ever seen. It just opened wider, a raw circle that split the soft pink into something pale and slick. The scream that came out was thin but sharp enough to stab behind my eyes. I pressed my hands to my ears, fingers shaking. The rule burned through my brain. Do not listen. But how could I not? It slipped through my palms, a cry that burrowed under my skin like cold air through a cracked window. I should have waited, should have stayed behind the counter. But my body didn't listen. My feet moved on their own, inching closer until I stood over the carrier. My hands lifted. Stupid hands, always wanting to fix, to soothe. I reached for the blanket, ready to rock it quiet. The baby's tiny fist shot out from under the cloth, impossibly fast. Its fingers clamped around my wrist like ice poured straight into my veins. The cold hit me hard, spreading up my arm, crawling under my skin, numbing every nerve it touched. I gasped, but no sound came out. My jaw locked tight. When I blinked, the carrier was empty. The blanket slumped like a shed skin. The cold stayed behind, pulsing deep in my arm like something tiny and patient had burrowed there. In the break room mirror an hour later, I rolled up my sleeve and found them. Small, perfect bruises shaped like tiny fingers, pressed purple into my skin, in a ring that never faded, no matter how hard I scrubbed. I didn't bother calling my doctor. I didn't bother telling anyone. The store knew. The store kept count. Every broken rule left its mark. When I clocked out that morning, my reflection in the automatic door told me the same thing the envelope in my pocket did. I was running out of skin to lose. By my last week, I knew the store better than I knew my own apartment. The shelves felt like walls closing in every time the automatic doors sighed open for another customer I didn't want to see. I'd stopped bothering to fix my hair. There wasn't enough left to hide the thin patches anyway. My gums bled if I yawned too wide. The cheap antiseptic mouthwash did nothing but remind me what I'd lost every time I spat pink into the break room sink. I still kept the red envelope in my pocket. The paper had gone so soft it felt like old fabric, the ink smudged at the corners from my fingers, tracing each word like it might save me if I read it enough times. But there was no saving left. Not really. Rule 7. When he comes, give him your license and logbook. Do not follow. If he touches you, you're his. I read that line so many times the words blurred into each other. I told myself it wouldn't happen. That maybe I'd finish the shift, clock out, and find Miss Agnes waiting by the door with a new envelope and a gentle promise that it was over. But the store doesn't run out of inventory. It just replaces what it loses. It was the last Friday of the month when he came. I knew he'd arrive before I heard the doors slide open on their own. The clock above the register flicked past 3 a.m. The lights over aisle 7 buzzed so loud I almost didn't hear the soft whir of the doors parting. He stepped inside like he'd always belonged here. The doctor in white. His coat was too bright, the kind of clean you only see on hospital brochures and bleach ads. It hung off him like fresh linen over bones that didn't fit together quite right. He moved down the main aisle without a sound. I couldn't make out his eyes under the harsh fluorescence. Only the shine of skin stretched too tight, the hint of nails so pale they looked clear when they caught the light. He didn't smile at first. He just stopped in front of my counter, close enough that I caught the smell. Antiseptic sharpness mixed with something older, moldy, like medicine that's gone bad at the back of a locked cabinet. He raised a hand, palm up, fingers just a little too long. "License," he said, voice flat and dry, like a pharmacy intercom reading out specials nobody ever buys. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what he was or what he wanted with me. I pulled my badge from my pocket, the plastic cracked from too many shifts, the photo a blurry memory of a girl who thought this job would save her. I laid it in his palm. My logbook followed, pages smudged with my shaky handwriting. my signature on every line for every pill bottle that passed under these lights. He tucked both into the inside pocket of his coat, movements smooth and practiced, like he'd done this 1,000 times before and would do it 1,000 times again. He turned as if to leave. I almost let myself believe that was it, that I'd done what the rules said, that I'd get to watch him vanish through the sliding doors the same way Mr. Greycoat drifted through the glass. But then he paused. He looked back. His mouth shifted into something that was supposed to be a smile, but didn't fit his face right. Thin lips stretched over teeth that were too small, too perfect, lined up like pills in a blister pack. He lifted his hand and placed it on my shoulder. Light, almost gentle. The weight of it sank through my skin like cold medicine seeping into a bruise. I felt it all at once. The twins' giggles echoing from the freezer door, the crawling patient's bloody fingerprints smearing the pill bottles, the baby's tiny scream burrowing under my skin where the bruises never faded. The weeping man's voice, my mother's words twisting behind my teeth. Mrs. Ellis's rotten hiss still stuck under my gums. The store shuddered. The aisles seemed to breathe around me, the shelves pulsing like lungs squeezing stale air into the cold drinks case. I could see faces pressed against the glass, shapes shifting behind candy bars and cough drops, shadows with teeth all waiting for their turn. His breath hit my cheek, warm and sour, like medicine that's spoiled but refuses to be thrown away. "You're part of the overnight inventory now," he whispered. The words rattled in my jaw like loose change in an empty till. When the automatic doors sighed open again, the dawn was just starting to smear pale light across the parking lot. The next customer walked in, blinking, tired, digging for loose bills to buy cigarettes or cold medicine they didn't really need. They didn't see me. They wouldn't. Not anymore. Tomorrow, the shelves will be restocked, the candy aisle refilled, the gum display straightened like nothing ever shifted it in the first place. Miss Agnes will stand at the door again, lavender perfume floating in the stale store air. She'll smile at some fresh grad desperate for hours, desperate for a paycheck that won't last, and behind the pharmacy counter, behind the break room door, under the hum of flickering lights that never turn off, I'll be here, waiting behind the glass. Another piece of stock that never expires. The register chimes. The door sighs open. Another shift begins, and I never clock out.